All right, another episode from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. I want to shout out VetLife, our sponsor that's backed us now for almost 100 episodes. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I want to introduce Adam Hollier, and I hope that I pronounced that right.
You absolutely did, and most people don't. So
there we go. Step one, we've
right
crushed it. You haven't seen any of my episodes, but I start them all the same. I don't really want to know about the man that you are today yet. I want to take your story all the way back. I want to know, where were you born and raised? What were you like as a young man? What were the kind of pivotal moments or things that shaped you, and kind of what led to the man that we have today?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Detroit. I live a whopping 2 blocks from my parents. They still live in the house that I was raised in. My whole family for a long time lived, kind of that same 2-block radius. I've got 2 little kids, and so I'm raising them kind of the same way that I did. But I was a lifelong athlete, played football, ran track. I was a decathlete in college, 2 sports in high school and all those kind of things. Loved to lift weights and do, all those kind of things. I played baseball and soccer as a little kid, but we didn't have high school soccer in Michigan or in Detroit. So I was like, boom, I'm going to start playing football. That's what all the cool kids do. And when I went to high school, I played baseball and ran track my freshman year, but that was too much, so I just ran track. Went to Cornell, played football there, was a decathlete. Yeah, it's kind of me. In a nutshell, always involved in government stuff. I was citywide student council president, Michigan youth governor, right? Like I was one of those kind of people that are always doing all the things that could be done.
Where does that come from? Why were you like that as a child? I'm picturing this just straight winner across the board. You're crushing it. You go to Cornell. You are, in multiple sports. I mean, you're really squeezing the juice out of life as a young kid. Where does that come from?
I'm a second son. So, my brother is 11 years older than me. Coolest, most fun person you could, 6'5". You can't tell this from sitting down, but my brother's like 8 inches taller than me. But you have all those kind of things where you're like, hey, I'm gonna maximize everything that I possibly can with the moments that I have, right? So I wrote my college essays about an experience I had when I was 4.5. I was the youngest kid at camp. My dad was a Detroit firefighter. He was a captain of the fire academy, and at the time, he was teaching he was doing fire prevention, and the fire department had this camp for like little kids, right? And he would go do magic and do all kind of stuff. And my older brother and older sister were there, and a number of my cousins. And I was like, "Hey, Dad, let me spend the night," and whatever. So I stayed, but there was a class called Personality Plus. And at the beginning of the class, the teacher or the instructor was like, "All right, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And like do all those kind of things. But I was the shyest kid that you've ever met, like painfully shy, super shy. In my heart of hearts, probably still feel that way, although no one would believe or agree. But I was terrified because I had no answer to this question, which feels like a simple thing, but when you're a little kid, some of those kind of things are anxiety provoking or whatever. But somebody volunteered, and I had this amazing rush of like, yo, it really isn't that bad. So from that moment on, I volunteer for everything because I know that somebody is having a moment. So like, if ever I can do the thing, I'm doing it, right? If I know the answer, I'm raising my hand. If I can accomplish a task, me first, because somebody is having one of those moments just like I did. And I understood how important and how valuable that can be. And when you are volunteering and saying, hey, send me, you get sent a lot of places.
100%. And you're probably growing tremendously because you're putting yourself in those experiences where, you have to kind of face that little bit of feeling in your stomach that you might get before you raise your hand, or you have to get used to being the person where the spotlight might be on you a little bit, but that's where the best parts of life lie, right? It almost reminds me in the movie Yes Man, when Jim Carrey just started saying yes to everything, and all of a sudden his life was dramatically better because he was putting himself out there. It's like you put yourself out there where you could fail, but you put yourself out there where you can succeed. And like you said, as a young child, you almost realized, if not me, then someone else. Why not me? So what was the home life like? Did you had your father, your mother?
My parents are the best, right? Like I grew up in TV family, right? Like my dad is amazing. He's like the kind of dad that you're like, oh, that's who you write a sitcom about, right? Like when he was just a regular firefighter, and regular firefighters for folks who don't work like 12 days a month, right? So they're on a day, off a day, on a day, off 3 days, on a day, off 5 days, on a day, off a day, on a day, off 7 days, right? So, but when he was home, we would just goof off and chill. And my parents would say that he would spoil me because we didn't have schedules, we didn't do those kind of things. And there's a big gap between my older sister and I, about 9 years. So we were really close, right? I'm really close to my siblings. My mom stopped working when my little sister was born, so she was at home. We did all those kind of things, right? It was just great. Like, my parents came to all the stuff. Like, we didn't have a bunch of money, but my parents were always there, right? Dad was at every game. My mom was there. We did all the stuff. We played all the board games, and yeah.
That's awesome, man. I mean, it sounds like everything was kind of in place for you psychologically, in your family unit, in athletics. Like, you really have had a great start. But I mean, obviously, you had to step out there. You had to take control. You had to go for what you want. But you have a beautiful launch into life. So as you're going through school, what did you think life was going to have in store for you? Like, what made you go the military route? What did you think you were going to be when you were a young kid? Like, what's the earliest thing you can remember that you thought, like, this is what I'm going to be? And then how did that change over time?
Yeah, so, I mean, just to put it kind of perspective, you talk about home life. My mom used to write positive affirmations in my lunch when she wrote me lunch, right? Like, I had little notes that it was like, hey, go be awesome today, or like, you can do this thing. We had the little cling things that went up on the kitchen or on the bathroom mirror, like, so you're looking at those kind of things every day. Like, that's the kind of family I grew up in, where my mom was like, yeah, you're going to accomplish everything that you want to do, and encourage me to want to do more and to be that way. And I also have understood that things, by and large, have gone my way, right? And as I look forward and out into those spaces, there are a lot of people who can't say that that's the case, right? Everyone likes to talk about a struggle story. It's like, no, it's not my story, right? My story is I've been incredibly blessed, which is why I have a responsibility and obligation to do more, and was raised in a household where that was the case. So it's like, hey, because this thing is happening for you, you have a responsibility to go out and do good into the world at every juncture. And so I wanted to be in a position where I could do the most good in the world. I told you my dad was a firefighter, but when we talked about politics around the table, it wasn't like most people, right? Like, we weren't talking about controversial issues or whose party or who was going to get elected. We were talking about whether or not people who were running into burning buildings were going to have the equipment and the training that they needed to be successful. Right? My mom was a social worker. We were talking about whether or not the people she worked with on a daily basis had the funding for the programs that made a difference. And so at an early age, when I was 8, my dad sat me down and told me I could never be a firefighter. And, that's kind of a weird conversation to have with your kid. But he was like, you don't have that little bit of natural fear that brings you home at night. He's like, it's a really important thing to know that there is a line and you should not cross it, right? But he always had this, he would always say that I would think that I could go just a little bit longer, that I could save that other person. And the most difficult decision he'd always say he had to make was that there were people he couldn't save. And he would say, I didn't have that in me, that I was going to think, maybe you can't, but I can. And so I promised myself I was going to take care of the people who ran in, because somebody was making decisions on whether or not my dad had the stuff he needed. Somebody was making the decisions on whether or not the programs my mom was working were actually going to take care of people and help them get out of the situation they were in, versus just being stuck where they were at. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to do.
Man, shout out to Mr. and Mrs. Hollier. I want to meet you and shake your hand, because that is the foundation you're supposed to give children for them to be successful in this life. Is you get them to believe in themselves, you encourage them, you get them to go try to be all they can be. And then your father even tempered you with a little bit of like, but hey, that blind confidence can kill you, or can affect you very negatively if it's not controlled. But like, man, I'm loving the story that I'm hearing. Why? And you know what's great? That you took that start.
Oh, yeah.
And you ran with it. And I guarantee your mother and father look at you now and they're just so insanely proud, because, it is your life to live still. Even with that foundation, even with those parents, if you had chosen like, oh, I'm going to, do whatever I want, I'm not going to follow any code that's been set down by my father and my mother, or any honor system or whatever it is, you might not be the man that you are today. And it's amazing that you're saying, I like how you owned it, where you said, I've had an incredible life. My life has been, amazing, but I want to serve others. I think a lot of the best human beings I've ever met, they all get to that point. And some of them come from a ton of struggle. Like, I have the same extreme drive to serve and help others become the best versions of themselves. Like, I try to see people like as if I'm showing them a mirror of who they can be. And I want them to chase that version. But mine comes from, I've been in the dark and I've been in some pain and depression and hopelessness and helplessness that I don't want to see other people in that place. but it's the same source. It's like when you are happy and you have your life together, you want to see others that way. I want to be able to hear great stories. I want to sit down with people that have done incredible things and figure out how do we get more of this type of energy. So man, I'm already completely hooked on this episode, and we're what, 10 minutes in. So you're going through school, you know, you made a reference about the, you know, not being a firefighter. You chose to go military.
Yes.
That's bullets flying at you. I mean, a flame is extremely dangerous. My fiance's father was actually chief of police in Detroit, or chief of fire
department.
fire chief. Sorry, not chief of police, fire department. His whole career was Detroit Fire. And you know, what was that conversation like when you're like, "Hey, Dad, I'm gonna go Army"?
You know, it's funny. So I was thinking about going to the Naval Academy in high school because I wanted to fly. Right, I am of the age that I saw Top Gun and was like, "Yeah, doing it, totally."
So you got to be like 38, 39.
Yeah, I'm 37. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
I knew it
so
because I'm
like,
35, and I'm like, I remember Top Gun's impact.
It was a thing. Also, so super funny. Like, real fact, naval aviation recruiting went up like 50-fold
100%.
during that time. It was a huge boon to the Navy.
100%.
But so, like, I was getting recruited. I was going to play football. I had good grades. You know, they're always looking for people who kind of fit that bill. And I had been talking to an admiral regularly and, you know, was going through the process and getting my congressional recommendation and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, never heard back from them. But I went to school at a time where they sent you mail and they called you on the house phone. Not like today where they text you or they're on your cell phone or shooting you emails. Like, it was a very much so. They send you mail. They call you on the house phone, leave a message, right? And so I got hurt my senior year and my stuff got a little delayed. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm going to Cornell and playing football and all that kind of stuff. And then, but I would be at night through college, text, you know, online, chatting with the recruiter, like, hey, maybe I'm going to do this. Yeah. And so my senior year in college, I only needed 1 credit to graduate. So I took like 4 or 5 ROTC courses. I took mountaineering, marksmanship, military history, all kind of stuff. And I was like, hey, maybe I'm going to go into the Army and do this thing. And my girlfriend at the time, wife today, was like, yeah, if you do that, we probably won't stay together. So this is 2006, 2007. So this is right troop surgery moments. And so she was like, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. And I was like, I'm pretty sure she's the one. So, and grad school's paid for, so I already have a full scholarship to go to Michigan for grad school. And I'm like, oh, well, you know, maybe later. And so my wife and I vision board every year, or, you know, we kind of do that process. And so serving in the military was the one thing sitting out on my board. And it was like, I'm coming to a place where either this is going to happen or it's not. And so she finally said yes. And I shipped for basic training the week after my 30th birthday. So I was the very old guy at basic training, but I actually got permanently disqualified from the Navy because I'm too honest. So when you go through your MEPS process, which is the medical readiness stuff that you have to do ahead of time, they give you this very exhaustive questionnaire of things. And so it's like, have you ever had asthma? No. Have you ever used an inhaler? Yes. I used an inhaler one time, maybe twice, my freshman year in college, a couple months after my 18th birthday. So if it had happened before my 18th birthday, I wouldn't have had to disclose. But I had an upper respiratory infection while I was playing football and running track. Used an inhaler like twice.
That's
right?
pretty normal to recover from a respiratory infection. I mean, and
Correct.
Pneumonia, they give people inhalers.
Correct. But people lie, I guess. And so they were like, no one discloses using an inhaler twice. I was like, it says, have you ever used? And I was like, yeah. And I do the description. And I was like, but this should be easy to clear up because that's silly, right? And so they're like, nah, you need a pulmonary function test. So I get a pulmonary function test, right, from my doctor. And they're like, yeah, 140% lung capacity. You're good. This is silly. I don't know why they asked you to do this. And then they're like, yeah. Then the Navy has a Navy doctor do the same. And the Navy doctor's like, this is insane. You are perfectly fine. Why are you doing this again? This is crazy. What are you doing? They cleared me, but then the Navy was still like, nope. And then I went to the Army and I was like, hey. And they were like, yeah, no, we don't care. You're absolutely good. Please come now. So I shipped.
Wow, that is so bizarre. I mean, you're a high-level athlete. If you're in college athletics, I mean, you are a high-level athlete. You, through your honesty, had to go through all this extra work, cleared it, and then was still not approved. That makes zero sense at all. But anyway,
yeah.
So it changed your direction. You went Army.
Which is better. Like, Army, like,
yeah, I was
way
about
better.
to say, like, did you enjoy yourself more once you made the switch?
Love the Army. This is the right fit for me, right? Like, one of my closest friends in the Army was in the Navy before the Army. So he washed out of buds. But now he's a Green Beret today, right? went to Ranger School, beret. Like the swimming thing kind of got him in that space. But I like being out in the, as my wife would say, I like being out in the woods. I like going and do those kind of things. I like doing the stuff, right? I'm a paratrooper. Couldn't have done that in the Navy. In the Navy, if I had done it, I'd have been a intelligence officer, which is fine, right? Like nothing against that thing. But I like to do the fun things. And so in the Army, I rappel out of helicopters and I jump out of planes.
Well, I tell you what, man, a lot has lined up exactly as it should be in your life. And it's awesome
That's my
to
life.
hear. One of the things I want to ask about is you make a vision board. I mean, that's awesome. I make my fighters here make vision boards, and I'm very big into like seeing who you want to be because I believe it kind of gives you the framework to evaluate your daily actions by. If you know where you're, it's like having a GPS. If you understand the destination you're trying to reach, it's easy to evaluate, is this the right decision? Is that not the right decision versus just floating through? Where did this come from? How did you get you and your wife on board? You're making vision boards together. You're dreaming of the future. Where does this come from, Adam?
Well, my wife's a clinical psychologist, and her specialty is behavior change. So
She's a behavioral therapist.
she's a clinical psychologist.
That's
yep.
amazing.
And so, but she's all about behavior change. And so she was like, all right, we're going to vision board and we're going to make it an action. Because a lot of people vision board and they do it at the beginning of the year and they're like, oh, I'm going to cut out these Ferraris from magazines. Like, well, that's not really, do you really want a Ferrari? Well, what does it take to get that? And so she does a really good job of that. And then she put all those images on her screensaver on her computer. So it's constantly looking at it. Hey, how am I doing that? And from that has made it into a planner. So it's a pretty involved system that she has that I'm only able to kind of touch in. But her and her friends meet monthly with their goals meeting, and everything that they set out to do at the beginning of the year, they almost all achieve at the end of the year because they're focused on making forward progress on doing it, right? And I think the same thing is true about me and all those other kind of spaces. It's like as long as you are pushing in the right direction, goal-oriented, you're going to get and move in the right spaces. I think people are often concerned about making a plan because they're like, well, but then it'll change. It's like, yeah, a plan is not like an ironclad document. It's like GPS. But GPS is constantly recalculating based on the new information it has. Like, oh, it sees an accident. Oh, this thing is closed. Oh, this is maybe a faster thing. And so as long as you're doing that with your plan is still good. But you got to do the things necessary to make it work. So when I graduated from middle school, my dad gave me a clock and a compass. And he'd always say that with a clock and a compass, you can find anything because you have an understanding of how long you've been going in whatever direction, you know where you're going, and you understand direction and time. And as long as you understand direction and time, you can get where you need to go. You can backtrack, you can move forward, but you can navigate. And that's what life is about.
Adam, you need to be a motivational speaker as well. I mean, 100%. This is the things that people need to hear. The GPS doesn't just get you to, it doesn't say this is the road you must take to reach your destination. It says we're going to get you there, and roadblocks are going to come up, accidents are going to happen, all kind of things might take place, and they might be inconvenient, and they might slow you down. But it's about getting to the destination that matters. It's not whether you get there when you expected to arrive. It's amazing. I mean, I'm blown away at how many things in your story all kind of paint the exact same picture. Where does this, okay, so you're truthful to a degree where it actually was painful to you and caused you a lot more difficulty in your life. Where does that come from, Adam?
I mean, that's how the things work. I mean, my dad is probably the best person in the entire world. Like, I've never met anybody who doesn't like him. There are lots of people who don't like me, but like, I've never met somebody who's like, everyone's like, oh, your dad? Carl Lee is your dad? Yeah. Oh, he's such a nice guy. Tell him I said hi. How's he doing? Like, he's just that kind of person. My mom is very intent on us being the best that we can be and being who we are and expecting that. But honestly, that's the thing that pays off for me, right? Like, this is a kind of a weird example, but I was playing Monopoly with some friends, and I play a game of growth, right? So when I'm making a deal, I'm like, hey, does this thing move me forward? If yes, I'm making the deal. I don't need to get the best deal in the world. The first deal is not the deal that matters to me. It's not the second deal, the third deal, the fourth deal. That's where I'm successful. And you can't be successful in that way if everything you've built isn't around truth, right? Also, I'm a bad liar, right? Like, some people are really good at the deception. My wife would say I'm absolutely terrible at it. But it's because I don't try, right? Like, I know that I'm going to get way more value out of us building a relationship that is built on this strong foundation. And the more we do that, the better off that I'm going to be. Because people who are trying to win this one don't win.
100%. I mean, that is just so accurate and spot on. But it seems like it was the love and the leadership and the support system and everything that was built kind of that you came into, and it's like, this is the framework for your young adult life. You were like, this is what a man should be. This is how my mom, this is love. This is a great family unit. Look at my brothers and sisters. Like, look at this opportunity I have in front of me. You put your mindset in a view of the world. Like, your perception outward was that there's a lot of good out and a lot of good in. And when those things merge, that's where life can be what it should be. Man, I'm blown away. So, let's move your story towards how do you decide to get into the political realm? Because I hate to say it, but truth in the political realm is like those people usually hold those things like mutually exclusive.
I think that's what people say. I don't think that that's true.
I don't necessarily believe that just because you're a politician, that means you're going to lie, this, that, and the other thing. But I'd say you definitely had to face a bunch of stereotyping, a bunch of people trying to say that, like, well, because you're going to be a politician, this means A, B, C, D. No, it doesn't change anything about the man that you are. Adam Ollier is Adam Ollier regardless of what titles you put on. And if you allowed, something to change that person, the only unfortunate part of that is that you adjusted yourself based on a setting versus trying to change the setting with who you are. But it's definitely a realm that, like, you could have done anything. When I'm sitting here and talking to you, I feel like I'm the same type of person. If I put my mind to something, I just know I can accomplish it. So you have a million roads in front of you. What makes you decide that I'm going to go into the political realm?
Well, as a kid, I started thinking about where do you have the opportunity to make the decisions that were going to make a difference in my family and in the community that I lived in. And you hear people say exactly what you said, right? That there's this incredible mistrust in government. But I'm like, how do you not trust the thing that has such an important and critical impact in your life and every decision you make?
Well, can you see how people wouldn't trust it?
But the issue wasn't that. The issue was, how do you leave something, a system?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay, that you don't
that
trust,
makes sense.
Right? Like
100%.
It's like walking.
Why don't we put good people in there then? 100%.
It's like if your house is on fire, you can't love your house and be like, oh, I'm going to live here, and then not do anything to put it out. So I'm like, hey, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go make sure that the house stops burning if it's burning. But then you start to work through this process and you're like, that's really not what's going on. So when I was 10 years old, the Million Man March happened. I don't know if you know about it, but it was the Million Man March. It was this really incredible, influential kind of moment where it was set up for 1 million black men to go to D.C. When I was 10 years old, and I was like, hey, Dad, let's go. And he was like, no, we are not going to this thing. I was like, Dad, we should go. And he's like, Adam, are you serious? I was like, yeah, because he would always tell me that when history happens, don't miss it. Because Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech in Detroit before he did it in D.C. My dad went to a baseball game that day. And he doesn't even love baseball that much, but, like, he went to a baseball game that day. And, at the time, he was a kid. He wasn't expecting it to be everything that it was, but it was. And so I was like, Dad, you said when history's happening, don't miss it. So we went down to D.C. with a bunch, on a bus with a bunch of firefighters.
What year was this?
95. And so we went down, and it was like, hey, we're doing this thing, we're going. And it was this incredible experience. But also they were talking about, and this will be kind of funny for modern folks, but they were talking about crowd size. They were like, they're not 1 million people. I was like, Dad, how do they even know how many people? He's like, well, they take aerial images and they count on the National Mall. And I was like, and so I looked up at the Washington Monument and I was like, hey, Dad, let's go stand in this ridiculously long line and take a photo looking back. And so he's like, I was like, come on, Dad. So we go, he takes his photo looking down at the Capitol from this moment. And that photo became kind of popular. So they gave a copy of it to then Mayor Archer. And when I'm talking to Mayor Archer, he's like, it's rare that anybody sees a problem and immediately looks for a solution. You should consider doing this. And so at 10, the mayor of the city of Detroit was like, hey, you should think about this government thing. And I was like, yeah, I will think about this government thing. And so, Mayor Archer has been a friend and a mentor since then. And I appreciated his support in all those kind of moments. But as I talked about it, things have gone my way. And I've been really grateful for those opportunities. But it starts from being willing to do what is before me. I don't know if you ever read the book, The Alchemist.
Yeah, of course. I love it.
Right? So it's like when you're chasing your personal legend, like the world is conspiring in your favor. So I firmly believe that the world is like, yeah, man, cool. And sometimes it gets a little bit rough, like as you get close and you do those kind of things, but it ebbs and flows. But you're you just got to be believing that the things will
Sometimes
be
you're
right.
in the market and you lose your money and you lose your sheep and you think this was a terrible idea, but it all works out.
Yeah, or you get robbed right when you think you're at your place, and that's what sends you where you need to go.
100%. That's actually my favorite book of all time. I have a copy sitting on my desk at home, and I tell everybody about it. So it's funny that you reference it. It's
a great
crazy that you said at 4.5 years old, there was this influential moment in your life that changed your life. And then at 10, there's this influential moment. So it's like, that's something to keep in mind, that like when you're interacting with these young kids, like you don't know what moment could set them out on a path that drastically alters the course of their life or their self-belief or who they're going to be in this world. And I mean, those are extremely inspirational stories. And we need to keep in mind that like, that's why the tiny things matter.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? The little things that you might think are mundane or just a casual conversation can be something that alters the course of someone's life forever. You know, and that's something that when you view life through that lens, it makes you just more conscientious about who you are, about what you say, about how you behave, and that's a better world. You know, so you go to run for politics. What is the first office that you had held?
I was on the school board in Ann Arbor when I was a grad student at Michigan. So I got elected when I was 23 to the school board.
And you got elected your first time running, right?
No, my second time. So
okay.
I waited. I kind of last minute. I was having a conversation with some folks about school board stuff and talking about how young people should run for the school board, like should be on school boards because they have less of a vested interest in the individual student issues. So like if you're a parent, you care about your kid's issues, right? If your kid plays in the band, you want them to have the best band program in the world. If your kid has special needs, you want them to manage those. If your kid is an amazing athlete, if your kid, whatever your kid's issues are how you view schools. But when you don't have kids and plan to have kids, your kid could be anything. So you need the system to actually work and work for everybody. And so sometimes you talk your, you cash, you start writing checks and people are like, hey, are you going to cash those checks? Right? Like, it's like coming to the gym when you're like, yeah, man, you should be able to do so-and-so and so-and-so and so. And someone's like, well, can you? Here's the mat. And so I ran against a well-liked incumbent. I spent $47. I lost by like 4 points.
That's incredible for the people that don't follow politics and like campaigns closely to spend $47 and be that close, because generally whoever raises more money has a substantial advantage.
Oh, for sure. Money makes a huge difference. And so then the next year there was a vacancy. And so I decided to run. And this is kind of the weirdest election of all. So like I had expected to be getting my PhD at Michigan and then ultimately decided not to. So I was like, well, maybe I'm not going to be in Ann Arbor for the next 5 years like I had expected. But it was too late to take my name off the ballot. So I wrote a letter to the, I wrote an op-ed to the news and was like, hey, don't vote for me. Don't vote for me, right? Like, and I posted and this kind of stuff. I got 67% of the vote. I was running against someone. It's like in that old movie with Richard Pryor. It's where, what's it? It's, I don't know. He's got Brewster's Millions. He's like voting none of the above, and then he realizes that maybe people are actually going to vote for him. He's like, look, don't vote for me. But yeah, I literally was like, don't vote for me, and I won. And so I served on the Ann Arbor School Board for a little while. I got elected to the state senate in 2018, and I ran unsuccessfully for Congress in 2022. I raised a little over $1 million. My opponent gave himself $8 million. So, and he won by 4 points. It was a 10-person field. So it was pretty crazy. But, things happen when they're supposed to.
Wow. And one thing that I've always believed, until 2020, I'm someone that tried to avoid politics at all costs. I just tried to focus on like my family, my friends, my community, the people that I love. I tried to do as much as I can to make an impact, but I wanted to like stay out of politics because I probably cast an unfair judgment of the field in general and was like I would never want to be around. The people we really need in office are probably the ones that don't even necessarily care about being in office. I mean, they care because they want to serve people, but they're not driven by like, I want the influence or money or power that would come with this position. Like those are not the people that we want in office. So it's priceless that you were like, hey, don't vote for me. Like I have all these other things going on. I accidentally threw myself into the mix, and they're like, that's the guy right there. That's hilarious. And if you look at a lot of the Stoic philosophers through history and stuff, they always talked about like good men and women and good people should want to serve, should want to be a servant of the people. And I do believe that now as I've gotten older. I look back and I'm like, you know what? If you have put your life in order and you're doing the right things and you are a man of truth and honor, those are the type of people we need. So it's almost like a burden that you don't really want to carry, but you probably should. Otherwise, someone else is going to fill that spot that could be a much lesser candidate with way less love and acceptance and, good qualities within themselves. And they're going to cast their views upon people the same way the parent that has their kid in band is going to give preferential treatment to band. We're probably getting that in the political world. So really what we need is more people that have themselves in order and their lives in order and a track record of showing that they're really trying to do the right thing and live the right way. Those are the people that we need to serve. So another thing, you mentioned the school board. So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on, I used to run a program called Martial Arts in the D. Basically, we were sponsored by the UAW, and one of the things I did, former vice president, his name was Jimmy Settles. I had met him down in Detroit, and we were brainstorming a program to work with the Detroit kids. Basically, like to go into the schools and do like an after-school program to like give these kids some good martial arts and like make them feel awesome. So I was going down every weekend, and I was training the kids in martial arts, and like, man, we were having a blast. But I was talking to a lot of the security guards and the people down there. He's like, man, I got kids bringing guns to school in cereal boxes down here. I've got kids, like, the conditions were something that, like, I couldn't even wrap my brain around for, like, this is the environment that they are growing up in and that they're accustomed to. Like, when we talk about the framework that made you the man that you are, maybe the framework that made me the man that I am, when you see things like this, and when you look at funding numbers and stuff, like, Detroit gets great funding for its schools on just a dollar, and how much money goes to the school. How in the world do we try to give those children that don't have the correct framework what they need to become Jameses and Adams in the future? You know what I mean? Like, from being in government, being on a school board, what have you seen and where do you think the disconnect is where we can actually make a difference, but it's just clearly not happening?
I mean, the biggest thing and the only thing that seems to work 100% of the time everywhere is economic diversity. Right. So what we know is that children who go to school in high poverty schools are less successful than children who don't. It's the number one predictor of educational achievement and attainment is the educational achievement and attainment of your parents, which levels very closely to SES, which is socioeconomic status. Right. So if we said, hey, we want these numbers to change, either we could, as a community, decide that our schools are going to be designed in a way that they provide people the wraparound services and support necessary for them to be successful, or we can say we leave it up to parents. What a lot of people say is, hey, you look at this school district and they get the same amount of money as this other one, or they get more, but they're being asked to do way more. So you look at the city of Detroit's school district, like DPSCD, it gets more funding because it gets more Title I funding, which is because it is providing services and care and additional things that are designed to supplement low-income students specifically. So it's not that they get more total, it's that they're getting more to do some other programs, but hey, I'm going to go produce this same thing is very different. So when I was in the Senate, I had a number of school districts. I had Grosse Pointes, which is one of the wealthiest, most affluent school districts, Detroit Public School Districts, Hamtramck, Highland Park, Harper Woods. So those were the school districts that I represented. A big difference in the things. And so you talk about what do you have compared to one school to the other. So yeah, if a DPS CD program they maybe get a little bit more state dollars today, but that was not the case for years and years and years. So affluent communities like Grosse Pointes used to be what they called 20J districts, and that only went away in the late 2000s. And so that allowed school districts to pay more in property taxes, and so they'd get more. So the wealthier school districts, by and large, had more money to operate and less things that they need to cover because, parents would pay for a new gym, they'd pay for all those other kind of things. So students in Detroit don't actually get more money spent on them. They do get a little bit more state money spent on them, but they're tasked with doing way more. And we don't look at it appropriately and say, hey, how many parents are able to do this, right? So I grew up in a household where my parents were able to participate in sports. Some of the kids on my team's parents work, but they could buy, extra snacks or they could cover the extra field trip, right? Like my parents didn't have the capacity to do those kind of things, but you had that balance. And so that's how systems work well when you have, the wealthy dad who can buy all the stuff and the involved dad who can coach every week, right? Or you have the mom who can chaperone the field trips, or you also have the mom that can plan and organize and get the deal because of her work context, right? She's got sponsorship for the team so that you can actually go on the trip. And those are the things that we don't look at. We want to look at them in one space. But the way I look at government, the way I've always looked at it is if you want more done, you have to be willing to pay for and give it more. And I always say pay for because it's time and resources. It's not necessarily a direct dollar, but it is people's time has value. So you can't ask people to volunteer indefinitely for something because they can't, right? And so when you say, how do you make the schools better? You give them more resources, you give them more stuff, right? I will never forget the difference between when I was in high school, I did this program called Generation of Promise. It was a program run through Focus Hope, and it gave high school juniors this kind of cohort between schools in the Tri-County area. And my partner was from Birmingham Groves. Oh, I had two. So, and the other one was from Detroit Northern. So that was my neighborhood high school. I went to Renaissance and Birmingham Groves. And so we went and spent a day each at each other's schools. So I went to my neighborhood high school, which was 2 blocks from my, house where my parents, raised me in. And one of my elementary school best friends went there, right? But you had to wear a mesh book bag to school because somebody had got pistol whipped, right? Like they had all the metal detectors. But, they had decent facilities, right? Like they had a pool and all kind of stuff. We go to Renaissance. We didn't have any of those kind of facilities, but it was a space where there was an expectation that you would be excellent, and people were. I went to Birmingham Groves, and this is 2002, and I saw smart boards. I didn't know what a smart board was. Like I had never seen such a thing, right? Like we were using transparency paper for I don't know how old your people are. Transparency paper is like a projector with clear plastic that you put on and people write on it with a dry erase marker. And that was high tech. That was like, this is the technology that we use instead of just using the board. And it's like, but they had like computers connected to stuff. And like you went into their facility, like they had field turf in 2011, 2001, 2002. And I was like, what in the, like everything was very different. And so when we talk about those differences, there's huge disparities because of everything. And we're okay with that because people believe that you should be able to give your children the very best that you can give them. And if you drive a Lamborghini, your kids should be going to school where they are in a commensurate type of space. But the flip side of that is there's some people who don't drive at all and their school looks like it. And that's the difference.
Do you think, let's say you and I, if we were raised in a school that didn't have much to give, that we would have changed who we are?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be a different person.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, our path would be different, but you think you would still be committed to truth? You'd be committed to love, service, trying to make the world a better place. Do you think that those things would still be constant?
I hope so. But I think it's important to recognize that we are all built every day by the life experiences we have. Right, I know you're a martial artist, and so I don't know have you ever read Musashi? It's my favorite book by Eiji Ishikawa. And so you talk about who would he have been if not for his battles? He would be a completely different person, right? And the battles that you have to fight are different based on the environment that you live in. And when we talk about what it's like to go to a school where you feel unsafe. So I worked in a job where we cleared out a bunch of vacant lots. I worked for Hans Woodlands over on the Lower East Side of the city of Detroit. And so I'm over at Southeastern High School. We're talking to the kids and I'm like, hey, what was the impact that you see? This young girl, senior in high school, one of the few people in her class who's going to college, said she went to school on time. And I was like, what? She didn't go to school until the sun came up because she was afraid of 2-legged and 3-legged dogs. And at first I was like, wait, what? Oh, she's afraid of a dude. She's afraid that she would get pulled in a tall grass or one of those vacant homes and raped. And so she did not go to school until the sun came up. And so anybody who lives in Michigan know that she was missing her first class a variety of days because the sun is not up when that first class starts. And so when we talk about the difference in what that does to you, it does do something different. One of my really close friends who is a senior government leader, right? Her and I were, as adults, as staffers together, walking into the city of Detroit's city county building, and she had to come back because she had a box cutter in her pocket or a razor blade or something. And I was like, what do you have that for? She was like, old habits, because she grew up on the east side, right? Like, that is a habit of her of having this thing. And I was like, all right, well, just throw it away. And she was like, nah, she put it under a plant so she could come back and get it because that is the kind of life that she grew up with. And so I would love to say that I would be sunshine and rainbows if I had lived a different life. But I'm sunshine and rainbows because it has been the kind of result that I have, right? When you have a training method that works for you, you keep going with it. Only the very best of people are able to deviate from a winning plan.
Maybe that's just that endless hope that I have, because I like to think that kind of no matter what situations you put me through, that like I would just turn out to be a good person. I was just like people got stabbed in my high school. A kid got got jumped by two people and beaten to death, died from a brain hemorrhage. Like I grew up in Philadelphia. So I don't know, you see that and you can either let it take you that direction, or you can still be like the world needs less of that. Like I'm not going to be that. But like I said, hearing what you're saying, yeah, maybe. And I remember when I was going down to Detroit on those Saturday in the D, like those kids have a rough set of circumstances to deal with. And you can tell the home life is either non-existent, completely chaotic, or they don't have the leadership. They don't have the structure. Like you had a father that you looked at as like a superhero, and so did I. I looked up to my father like man, that's what I should aspire to be, But it just, when I think of these complex problems, it's almost like my brain tries to overly simplify it. Like, how do we get people to just want to take up the good fight?
I think that's not the challenge. I think the answer is just, are we putting them in the system? So the question is, who do we think is responsible for putting them in the system? Too many people, in my opinion, think that your parents are responsible for raising your kid. That's a bad system.
How did your parents do so well?
No, my parents were great, right? Like,
but how?
100%. But the reason I say that is, if our system is designed for parents to be the difference maker, then if you don't have those parents, you're on the other side. And so I got the benefit of great parents. But my dad was a Detroit firefighter. He fell through floors and had to be pulled out of buildings on a number of occasions. He could have just as easily not come home one of those days.
100%.
And I would not be the person I am without him, right? So
But your father was committed to a path of excellence, right? Just like you and I are. So it's like, how do we get more people to take up that fight? And how do we provide them with the resources and the things to follow that path? But it's like you have to get that buy-in. You've got to get people that want to be like, man, we're going to go the right road, so that when my son one day grows up, like hopefully he's going to be an Adam Ollier, or he's going to be a James Gray, or he's going to be another person that lives with respect, that wants to try to serve too. And then it's a community effort. And like that's what you were
that's
alluding
what it's
to.
It's got to be a community thing.
Yeah, you were like, the wealthy father can do this, and maybe he can't do that. But you know what? This person can say, I got you on that. The fact that you're stepping up here and I'm stepping up here, like we're going to do this thing together. But one of the things that's difficult for me is like, if I'm living with integrity and honesty and hard work and all these things, and you're lying, cheating, stealing, abusing, all these things, I don't really want to work with you. Like, I mean, I'll try to mentor you. I'll try to build you up.
Legit.
But I can't get your buy-in.
That's the thing, though. We can't have a system. We currently have a system that is designed for parents to be successful or not. And if the price of their failure is all of those children. And so the system should be designed in a way that we are responsible for those children, right? So you have a school.
Over the parents.
Yeah, because otherwise, we're the ones that have to pay the cost of that decision.
Across society.
So you look at your gym, for example. We take the gym. Every kid should be healthy, should be able to come in and get on the mat and be able to learn to compete. But there are lots of kids who have never moved, or who have never been, they've never had that baseline built into them that, hey, they can accomplish a thing. So the first time you put them on a mat and somebody gets in a top position or a dominant position, they're like, I'm out. And you're like, no, bro, you weren't even close to tapping. Like, you should not have tapped out. Yeah, but no. You should be uncomfortable. Versus some kids who have lived a whole life of struggle and nothing. It's like, bro, you should have tapped out 5 minutes ago.
They're just unbreakable.
Right, like, he could have hurt you. And so the thing that I think we should be thinking about with society is, it's not about whose responsibility it is for kids to be successful. It's about who is harmed when they aren't. And we are all harmed when they are not successful. So either we're all in to fix it, or we can be happy with the results that we get. And that's the thing that people want to do. They want to be upset at people for not raising their kids. But some people don't have the capacity. Lots of people do not have the capacity to be great parents, even to be good parents. And we know that disproportionately, parents make a huge difference. I have a colleague, a good friend of mine, whose dad was also a firefighter, who passed 6 months after he was born. we would be I would be a completely different person if one of those days my dad hadn't gotten pulled out by another person. It's why I'm such a big supporter of unions, because the union fought for a 4-man ride, and that simple policy is the reason that there was somebody on the truck who could go pull my dad out of that fire. You know, that person who could pull my brother out of a fire, right? Like, those are the kind of things that change your life fundamentally. And I'm like, yeah, I'm with those guys. Those are the people who take care.
Man, amen to so much of what you just said, and you're spot on. I've been working with the Livingston County Juvenile Court for like 7 years, and I let kids come in from there, and I put them in like a big brother program, and I try to. And what it is almost all those kids, the parents are like, I don't know why they're being like this. I do. They have no structure in their home life. Their parents are often on drugs or making terrible choices, or there's no love in the home, or there's abuse, or the kids are broken and they're acting broken. Yeah. Well, that's not really that surprising. It's
correct.
It's almost like, yeah, you know, and I'm witnessing it firsthand, but it's like what you're saying is really making me consider a lot of the perceptions I have, because of the fact that I always look at it like, well, that's why it's so important to take personal responsibility to like be great, because like your children are going to affect communities, relationships, someone else's daughter. You have a son, that's going to affect someone else's daughter. That's going to affect the world. That's going to affect the workplaces that he enters, you know. But it's like, I 1000% agree that if more people would engage as a community, if more people would step up and be like, you know what, not to point any fingers, but maybe like these parents are failing miserably at supporting this young kid. And if we stepped in and gave this kid more of what they need in life, and like the little hand up, the little bit of encouragement, that speech you said on the side of the mat, I have it every week. You know what I mean? Like, you've got more than what you realize. Oh, yeah. Maybe no one's ever told you, but you are capable of so much more than you've ever considered. And we're going to work towards that. And if people kind of took up that fight, you know, like point less fingers and take more action.
Yeah, parenting is the only place where we expect someone who can't do themselves to be able to teach. Right? Like, imagine if a parent who's never gotten off the couch, they make the tough decision of bringing their kid into the gym, and their kid is like, and it's like the parents never exerted themselves that hard. The parents not gonna be like, hey man, you can go harder than that. I know you can. They can't teach you how to get out of that rear naked. They can't teach you how to get out of the arm bar. They can't teach you how to roll over. Maybe they can teach you how to turtle, but like that's just them getting in the fetal position, right? Like they can't teach you something that they do not know how to do, but we expect them to do that. And when we talk about what build relationships, it's community. So I told you I trained a little jiu-jitsu back in the day, but one of my closest friends, Anthony Fawaz, who's one of the owners of Detroit Jiu-Jitsu, one of my first days in training, I'm on the mat, and there was a kid there whose name is really Dion something, but he was a blue belt and like a BJJ world champion type thing as a kid, right? And I was 2 or 3 years out of being a college athlete, so I'm bigger and stronger. But he is working me, and everyone is like, obviously on Dion's side. And Anthony starts coaching me because I have capacity and skill and doing all this other kind of things. But the thing about jiu-jitsu is there's always a way out, right? Like, there is always a way. It's about, can you be calm enough to understand whether you can find it or if you're done? Because sometimes you can't find that way, and you just got to be like, you know what? You got me. And sometimes the person who beats you is a 260, 270 pound behemoth that is using no skill and is just got on top of you and crushed you. And sometimes it's a 130 pound woman who has just crushed you with infinite speed and skill, and you're just like, I can't do anything. But you lost those just the same. It didn't matter that one was big, didn't matter that one was small, it didn't matter that one was using all the skill and the other one wasn't. You lost, and you lost because you didn't have what you needed in that moment to win. And the coolest thing I think about jiu-jitsu is the same day that you beat somebody who is a black belt, you're going to get worked by a white belt because you're like, they're thrashing around. Yeah, but they still won, right? Like, it just is, and that's life.
100%, man. And like you said, there's so many parallels if you looked at the growth as a human being and what happens on the mats. And it's just from pushing your mind and just finding out that you have more than what you realized. And it really is a community effort, because that's what a great coach does. Mm-hmm. What a great coach does is push you beyond where you believe you can go, and then you find strength that you didn't know existed. And once that strength then comes to the forefront, you're a different person, and you carry that new version into the next trial. And then what happens? You get smashed again, and then you grow again. And it's like, that's the message that is finally really getting down from a lot of motivational speakers and stuff, is you got to seek that challenge. You've got to find things in your life in whatever avenue it is. If you want to be a better partner, you want to be a better father, you want to be a better man, you want to be a better woman, whatever it is, you have to seek those things and take your lessons and grow through those experiences. And then really, if we go back to, again, like the Stoics, then give to the people around you. Then go back to your community, reach out to those little kids that don't have that light in their life. Bring in more programs that are great. Like, have you ever heard of Reaching Higher? They just had their gala down in Detroit. No. It's a mentorship program that goes through the schools, and they're all over schools here in Michigan. I mentor for them regularly. It's just a volunteer service where we basically go in, we sit down with the young kids. You're talking about stress, goals, limiting beliefs, like all these different things. And you're trying to just get them a lot of times for the first time ever, to look at themselves and see the potential that exists within them, and man, there's been so many good parts of this podcast, and you've sold me, dude. Like I met you an hour and 15 minutes ago, and I'm going to be an Adam Ollier supporter from now until.
Good, I appreciate that.
Because of the man you are. Like, I don't know your stance on everything. Like, I hate to say it, but like the Democratic Party was like enemy number one to me from 2020. And I've never, true story, at 34 years of age, I had never voted in a single election ever because I just stayed out of it. I was like, I'm just going to do what I can do and help the people in my life and try to be a good man. But like, during 2020, all the craziness went down and the lockdowns and yada, yada. And about, 8 weeks into it, I had taken the choice to reopen my academy. I said, hey, like, taking care of your mind, taking care of your body, like, these are healthy things. Like, it's still good to exercise. You can't sit at home suicidal. You can't, like, I'm going to open my doors, unfortunately, against the governor's orders. And this is going to be a place where if you would like to be here, you can come here. And so I kind of got like pinned on, oh, you must be all this. And it was like, no, I'm right now I fall on the opposite side of the aisle as an entire group pushing one thing. And I don't know how a medical issue or like a virus can be divided on a political line. Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
You can divide anything these days.
Apparently. And that's probably the one of the main problems in society, because where's the community going to come from when you're hating all these other people? It's like, that doesn't make sense. You're casting an image upon someone just based upon a title. That is like the definition of stereotyping, or like where racism comes from and all these things. If you're this, you must be that. That's ridiculous. But I found myself getting completely boxed off to one side. And for a small period, it was like, am I like a hardcore Republican? Like, I don't know any of their stance on socioeconomic issues. I don't know any of their stances on countless things. But it was like, I found myself in opposition. After sitting here with you today, you're a Democrat that has run for office. Yeah. I would support you 1,000%, because forget that title. That is, from the man that I've interviewed in this last hour, it is so far down the list and how I would categorize you, it's almost irrelevant because of the man that you are above that. And, that's something that, shit, man, if you want to know who to support in life, like, get to know people.
Yeah. And I think
get to know your representatives.
That's the thing that people have lost in so much of these things. We label people based on one thing that may be a small part of what you actually care about, because it's the sexy thing, or it's the thing that people are talking about the most, but it's not the thing that you care about the most, right? So we often talk about flag burning or stuff like that. There's this quote in the West Wing where they're like, yeah, flag burning is super, people think that flag burning should be illegal. And like 90% of people agree with that. And then it's like, well, how much do people care about it? Oh, not at all. Right? Like, they don't, like, 10% of people think it's an important issue, right? Like, it's like, yeah, if you ask people, is it something that people should do? They're like, no. But if you ask them how important it is in their actual life, they're like, not that important.
100%, man. And like I said, your integrity, your honesty, your choices, are you a man that does what you say? Do your actions and words line up? If all of these things supersede that thing, then I don't care. Like, that's a very secondary factor. And it's funny we're having this conversation because I'm considering running for an office in 2024. only because of my desire to serve people as well. I had a guy come to me and basically said, dude, look at your life and look at what you're doing. You've been working with the court for years. You've been doing mentorship programs forever. You run the academy where you try to bring people out their best. Why don't you run for a local, office? Run for something like city council or, or whatever it may be. Because if we don't put good people in these positions, you're going to have people that don't have the characteristics that we listed up front making the decisions. So, I mean, there's a very good chance I'm going to run for an office, and I'm taking a lot of inspiration from you.
Yeah, I would say the thing about running for office is figuring out what you want to do and why you want to do it. I think we need a few less crusaders in office than people who are willing to get together and do the work. And the reason I say that is because when you're a crusader, you're like, you're right and everyone else is wrong, right? Like the very definition of a crusader.
Or activists. Like, this is my issue, and I'm not willing to talk to you about the issue. I know where my stance is.
Like the crusaders, right?
I mean, clearly there should be no crusades.
Well, but I mean, we have a lot of people who run for office with that mind. They're like, I have this one very narrow focus, and it must be accomplished. I care nothing about everything else. We'll burn everything else to the ground in this space. We need a lot more people who are going to be committed to getting things done, because I have always taken the belief that I cannot convince you of anything that I am not open to. And so if I couldn't be convinced, you shouldn't be trying to convince me. And so again, you go back with the Crusades, right? Like, if you believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, then no one could probably convince you that Muhammad was the last prophet. They couldn't convince you that Jesus was just a really cool rabbi. So as a result, you probably shouldn't be trying to convince someone who believes that Muhammad was the last prophet or that Jesus was just another rabbi that they're wrong. Because if you're not open, they're not going to be open. And we have too many people who are in office who are unwilling to engage in the truth that if they believe something beyond a shadow of a doubt, that someone else believes just as strong and is just as committed to their beliefs. I also believe that by and large, people who run for office and get elected do so to do good. And it doesn't do us any harm, or it doesn't do us any good to consider them the bad guy. So I have a 5-year-old, and when we're watching movies, she's always like, when she was a little bit younger, would always be like, is that the good guy or the bad guy? And I'm like, well, Lily, it's a little bit more nuanced than, she's like, the good guy or the bad guy. And I'm like, well, Lily, and that's how we look in life. It's like, are they good or are they bad? And it depends on your perspective.
It's on a scale.
Right? Like, they think they're the good guy. It's just, they may not be to us because we believe differently. But if we believed like they do, we would be all about it. And so, she's come of age as they've told the other side of some of the, as Disney's told the other side of some of those stories where it's like, yeah, maybe they were the bad guy on the other side, but this is how they got there. This is why they are who they are. And it goes back to our discussion about parents, right? You're like, why is this kid broken? Well, they were raised by somebody who was broken. And when you're broken, you break things. That's what happens. Unless someone else is around.
100%, man. I'm not religious, but I have friends that are devout Christians. I have fighters on the team that are Muslim and 100% are committed to their religion. I have multiple fighters on the team that are Jewish. Mm-hmm. And I love all of them. And those factors are way down the list again. Mm-hmm. Who they are as people is far more important to me. When you're speaking to the idea that you can't change your mind, the moment you close off your ability to take in any new information, what are you doing? Consciousness itself is evolving over time based on new information. Now, there are some basic principle, it's going to be hard to redefine that 1 + 1 is 2 or gravity exists or things like that. Mm-hmm. And you might need a substantial body of evidence to even sway people on an issue like that. But we need to come to the table with the open book type mentality of share why you believe what you believe and why you feel that it's backed in truth, which hopefully the foundation should be in truth or the right versus wrong. I agree 100% that there's nuance, but if you're murdering people and you're like, this is the reason I think I should murder people, you're going to have a harder time convincing me. I'm pretty, against it. With that being said, these are the conversations that need to take place. And this is actually why I started this podcast. In 2020 is when I launched this podcast. Mm-hmm. I said, you know what we need to do at the very bare minimum? We need to start talking together again. Mm-hmm. We need to sit down as men and women, and we need to talk about right from wrong, how to make a difference, how to help people, and then do something. Mm-hmm. Don't just say it. Don't just, this needs to happen. What are you going to do to ensure that happens? And are you based in a hate for something, or are you based in trying to do the right thing? Because if you're based in hate for something, that's where it goes off the rails. Because that's where the crusade comes in. Mm-hmm. That's where it's like, well, I'm willing to do this because it's the lesser of two evils. No, that's just not the right mindset, man. You got to be from a place of how do we make the world a better place for as many people as possible that live on this earth. Yeah. You know, and man, I don't think there's anything else to say on this podcast other than, Adam, I have enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. I really enjoyed meeting you today. You know, I have no expectations when I sit down with a guest, because I tell, like, Josh Parrish, the sponsor of the podcast, I let him pick like two or three guests a month, sometimes more. And I tell him, don't tell me anything. Mm-hmm. I want to get to know the people for the first time when I sit down and talk to them. I haven't been this moved by the man across the table from me in quite a while, because a lot of people are kind of cookie cutter. A lot of people, there's a lot of common denominators, and you can almost be like, you know what, they're going to fall into these boxes. And you're a winner. You're someone that you have the spirit of righteousness, like, behind your eyes. Like, I can see you're a man that wants to do what's right in a world where that is a very difficult thing to do. And I have a deep respect for that. So, and it's maybe it's not a coincidence that you're also a jiu-jitsu practitioner, you're a martial artist, you're an athlete in your life. You come from, you had a father as a phenomenal role model and a wonderful mother. And, whatever it is, I appreciate you. I appreciate this conversation. And, just anything you'd like to say, anything else you'd like to put on the podcast, people you'd like to thank, if you're going to run another campaign, I'd love to say that, I sat down and I 100% believe in the man that, you're either a phenomenal actor, like, and you better get your ass to Hollywood, or 100%, man. I truly was honored for this conversation today.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't think I'm that good of an actor. At least that's what my wife always tells me. So I don't think that's the thing for me. But I am really grateful that she gave me this opportunity. In my current role, I run the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency, and so I think it's really important that, I'm really grateful of all the good work that Vet Life does. If folks are having issues or need help, they can reach us at 1-800-MISH-VET. Once again, that's 1-800-MISH-VET, or they can go to our website at michigan.gov/MVAA. But we really want folks to reach out. There are a lot of benefits that service members are entitled to because they earned them. And we know that disproportionately people who have served are like, no, then I'll give that benefit to somebody else, right? It's that kind of selflessness that you see, but it's like, no, you've earned it. Take advantage of it. Your family needs it. You deserved it. And the more you use the benefits that you earn, the better we're able to provide them to the people who really do need them. So I hope people take advantage of them, right? And so we want to continue to do everything we can to do that.
1,000%. And I hope that what I try to accomplish in these episodes is I want to show the people behind the curtain. I want to show the men and women that are a part of these programs and projects for others to believe in. And I think anyone that watches this episode will be like, that's a guy to reach out to. That's a man that if he says, this is the company that can give me the help that I have earned. Not like, hey, you need help, take this. No, you've earned this because of your service. I believe that anyone that watches this episode will say, you know what? I'd like to get a hold of Adam, and I'd like to get the things that I've earned. And I'm not trying to do it as a charity case. I'm trying to do it because it's a part of life that will substantially help me get back on track. Veterans struggle at a rate that, like, it's insane. Like, I've talked to so many veterans that when they come back, it's a hard road. Mm-hmm. And that closing of a chapter is an extremely difficult process because, when you deeply tie identity to something,
yep.
And now all of a sudden that identity's gone. You're not surrounded by your brothers and sisters on a mission. Mm-hmm. You're just Adam back in normal life. And it's like, where's my camaraderie? Where is this? Where's the mission? What is the quest? What is the target? That's an extremely difficult process for a lot of people. And I think Vet Life does a great job. I'm very glad to hear that there's people like you fighting for this campaign. And I know a lot of veterans listen and watch to our episodes. So if you're a veteran, tell others about this. Feel free to clip this part of the episode, spread the word, and let's get you the benefits that you've earned and deserve. So thank you again, Adam, and we'll wrap this episode up.
Cool. Thanks for having me.